On today's episode of Locked On Wild, John Hynes not impressed with the Wild as of late.
Hey, this is Matt Boldy, and you're listening to Locked On Wild.
You're Locked On Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's happening, everybody? Welcome in to another episode of Locked On Wild, your daily Minnesota Wild podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team each and every day, and we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platforms so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by FanDuel. Super Bowl 59 is here, and there is no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. New customers can bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. On today's episode of Locked On Wild, Alex Micheletti joins us to take a look at some varying levels of heat that John Hynes has thrown in post-game quotes over the last few games. We'll hear from Bill Guerin as well. Both not particularly pleased with what we have seen over the last week or so. We'll talk about Marc-Andre Fleury getting punched in the face. We'll talk about getting back to the blueprint that led to the Wild having the most points in the NHL through the first 25 games of the season. And we'll talk about the now Mikko Rantanen-less Colorado Avalanche, because why? We'll talk about it, as well as how that kicks off what is going to be a really interesting trade season. My name is Seth Toupal, host of Locked On Wild, joined on a Victory Micheletti Monday by Alex Micheletti. Although it was a third period where it reminded me of, not to nerd out too much, it reminded me of Return of the Jedi, when Lando Calrissian is getting pulled into the Sarlacc pit, and Han Solo, fresh out of carbon freeze, is trying to shoot the tentacle, and Lando's like, wait, I thought you were blind. He's like, nah, it's all right. I can see a lot better. And after missing a couple of times, he hits the shot to release the tentacle grip. 3-0 lead through the first two periods. Chicago had 5 shots on goal. 5 shots on goal. And you give up a power play goal in the first 60 seconds of the third, and you hang on for dear life to a 4-2 win over a Chicago Blackhawks team that, last I checked, is not actively trying to win games. They just traded Taylor Hall to the Carolina Hurricanes as part of a blockbuster nobody saw coming. And it comes off the heels of 2 games that were pretty gross against Utah and against Calgary. And this, after you get Jared Spurgeon and Kirill Kaprizov back. And Alex, I'm a little confused, because getting those 2 back was supposed to solve all the issues. And now through these last few games, you're looking at, with the exception of the first 2 periods against Chicago, you're looking at some games that look worse than when those 2 were out of the lineup.
Yeah, it's a mess. Like I put out on X. You got, teammates not standing up for players. A Hall of Fame goaltender. What is no response to Rasmus Andersson? That was crazy. That they allowed that to happen. And of course, Trenin gets healthy scratched last night, because most likely because of he was signed to be physical and the guy that would stand up for teammates, and he did not do any of that. So that was interesting to see. And yeah, it just seems like there's a disconnect between the players and coach, and that's never a good thing, especially when we're ramping up to playoff time.
And let me tell you, John Hynes, not happy. I'm going to start from the quotes after the Utah game and work our way back to what we heard in the post game after. And we broke down the post game against Chicago for an episode that's dropping after this one. But we go back to the Utah game. Listen to this. And I quote, this courtesy of Joe Smith on X. We can't be any softer at the net front than we were tonight. I'm not even talking about goaltending tonight. I'm talking about what happened in front of the goalie, which was Philip Gustafsson in that Utah game. We can't be any softer at the net front than we were tonight. John Hynes has had enough. He's not somebody that really you don't see a ton. Like, I know it's there. I've seen it when things, there's a call that doesn't go the way that the Wild are hoping it should. I've seen some of it kind of off camera, but by all accounts was as animated as he has been since taking over as head coach in what happens between the Utah game and the Calgary game. And let's talk about the Calgary game. Here's a quote from after the Flames game from John Hynes. Joe Smith. John Hynes didn't think there was enough pushback from the Minnesota Wild after Anderson punched Fleury. I think we kind of just took that. Oh, wait, there's more. There is more. Now we get to this is the one that's a little confusing just because of the wording of it. This was after the Saturday. This was after the Calgary game. At the end of the day, you choose your hard. Now we're choosing to lose. We've got to get back to the commitment level it takes to win. The mentality, the fire, the competitiveness, the depth in the lineup. Right now, it's not enough. It's not enough. So that was after Saturday's game. Continuing the timetable, we had some lineup changes before the Chicago game. Declan Chisholm scratched for the first time since November 23rd. Yakov Trenin scratched for Devon Shore. As John Hynes said, quote, we need more from guys, and we need guys to play their roles. And so those two guys have a reset tonight, and we'll go from there. Not only that, but Ryan Hartman was bumped to the fourth line. John Hynes has had enough. John Hynes is sick and tired of it. He has had enough because at the end of the day, he's right. The blueprint for how this team wins games is sitting right in front of him. It's a matter of commitment and effort level. It's the things that are being asked to be done to win these games are not glamorous. They're not glitzy, but they're required. And when you don't do those little extra things, battling for the puck along the boards, making sure that you don't just hero yeet a puck through the neutral zone to be picked up by the opponent where they can just turn it right back into the defensive zone after you just spent 2 minutes trying to get out of your own end. When you do stuff like that, the mental mistakes just amp up the opportunities that the opponent has to score. And John Hynes has had enough of it.
Yeah, it's like I said, there's a disconnect between the coaching staff and the players, and they're going to have to figure this out very quickly because if you look at the standings, I mean, they're teetering at falling out of that top three and into the wild card spots. And I don't think this team wants to go to Vegas for a playoff series.
Yeah, I would not want
at all.
I would not want to tempt that fate.
Yeah, well, I mean, we'll see. Oh no.
Go ahead.
You cut out there.
I would not want to tempt that fate of going to Vegas at all.
No.
Like keep yourself in the top 3, or you've got to, because then, you've got a 5-point cushion, I think, right now between Calgary and Colorado. If you go to Winnipeg, if you go to wild card 2, then you're going to Winnipeg.
Yeah, they don't play well up there in Winnipeg, and I don't think Colorado's done making moves yet either.
Nope.
I just don't think you make them. Well, we'll talk about it later, but I don't think you make a move like they did and not have more arrows to shoot out. Yeah, it's just when your head coach and the GM are publicly saying they are not happy, it's never good.
No, and we'll talk next segment about Bill Guerin's comments and just the notion of allowing an opposing player to punch your goalie in the face during a scrum and just not doing anything about it. It truly was one of the more, and I get that it was downplayed by the team, but I made a particular comment during the postcast that I'll reiterate about how that would have been handled 10 years ago. Think about how that would have been handled 10 years ago.
Right.
Think about that over the break, and we'll talk about it as we continue today's episode of Locked on Wild after this. Today's episode of Locked on Wild is brought to you by FanDuel. Super Bowl 59 is here. One game, 2 teams, endless possibilities. And there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss, FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action. With live betting all game long, you can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. The live betting feature lets you stay involved no matter what happens on the field, and the app is super easy to navigate. Plus, knowing that you can place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in bonus bets for the Super Bowl, that's the icing on the cake. Download the app or head to the FanDuel.com to get started. Bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, official partner of Super Bowl 59. Welcome back to today's episode of Locked on Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked on Wild your first listen each and every day. We've got a second episode coming for you. John Hynes, post-game presser after the game against Chicago. We'll take the 3 biggest takeaways from that, including a step in the right direction, but not the finished product yet. So we'll take a look at some of the key themes. Also, don't forget the live show tonight at 8 p.m. Denny has been working all week, and he has discovered the secret to fix the Minnesota Wild roster and get them to the Stanley Cup. So make sure to tune in so you don't miss out, because it's like the blueprint is there. It's right there for the taking. Alex, Marc-Andre Fleury got sucker punched in the face against the Calgary Flames, and it just happened. Like, there was a little bit of a response, and more so just making sure that Rasmus Andersson got pushed to the ice. But Bill Guerin was not pleased about that. Listen to these quotes. The first, and they escalate. This goes from 0 to 100 very quickly. Guerin said he had his way with us, that being Rasmus Andersson. Like, it was not fun to watch. I'll tell you that. The funny thing is, that's not who this group of players is. It's really hard to figure out, but we're going to figure it out. The lack of response, and this is just in the article that was written for The Athletic, the lack of response, the lack of pushbacks as of late from the Wild, it's not the character of this team, Guerin said. I was disappointed in last night and have been too many times lately. During his chat with The Athletic before Sunday's win, Guerin didn't buy that the Wild's recent lackluster play, especially at home, where they've lost 9 of their past 13 and are 11, 12, and 1, is due to the dog days of the season. and a team fatigued because injuries have finally caught up to it. And I quote, "No, F that. F that," Guerin said. "You can be low energy and still play well. You've got to use your head. You know what? Everybody's tired. Everybody has a condensed schedule. Everybody has injuries. Everybody in this league has what we have. There's no excuse whatsoever for any of this." Alex, if Marc-Andre Fleury 10 years ago would have gotten punched in the face, the player that punched him in the face would have left on a stretcher, and the enforcer on the team would have left in a squad car.
Bill Guerin would have been. I mean, he was teammates, he was in Pittsburgh, not too long ago. Yeah, he would have done something. Yeah, it makes no sense. And the excuse from Marcus Foligno, I'm sure you saw that too. But he's like, we didn't want to put Calgary on the power play again. It's like, what? What? Like that. Well, I mean, so you just let them get away with it? Like, come on, what are we doing here?
Yeah, that's not a great response. I mean, right. You have to, at the end of the day, stick up for your teammates.
Yeah.
And think about it this way.
That's your Hall of Fame goaltender.
Marc-Andre Fleury a couple years ago was ready to fight Jordan Binnington because Binnington face-washed Ryan Hartman.
All right.
Think about that. A goalie willing to fight for a forward when 99 times out of 100, it's the other way around.
Yeah, 100%.
It's the forward that's doing the fighting. And this is something that has popped up periodically in that you don't see the team. Like, think about the hits that particular players on this team have taken that go largely unanswered. Some of them I've pointed out. Like, I think the LaRue one was one in particular. He refused to fight anybody when the slew foot happened. He did answer for it, but then guess what? He answered for it, and then he went right after Marco Rossi in that same game. You've got to you just have to be willing, I guess, to take whatever the consequence is, to say, we're not going to take this anymore. Like, you come at one of our guys and you are going to be sent off in worse shape than they are. And this is something that for the last, seemingly since Bill Guerin took over, has been a little bit of an undercurrent on this team.
Yeah, it's so frustrating because, teams that are, well put together, like they, you see that's why they win cups, the chemistry, and there's some type of, like, I keep saying it, but there's just some type of disconnect here. And if they want to go far, it's like, where's the cohesion? I just don't think the players are taking to heart the message that's being sent. And we can't judge it off the Blackhawks because the Blackhawks are not trying to win games.
Right.
I'm glad. I think we're all glad that they won, but do it against some of these teams that are going to be in the playoffs, not a team trying to tank again. So yeah, we'll see. We'll see this week.
And we've seen in previous, like, I think of the game against the Pittsburgh Penguins where Brock Faber got rabid because he got pushed up into the boards by Sidney Crosby, and he was like, "I'm going to put you through the glass."
Right. And Sid didn't want to fight, so it's
like it's something that you just, in the moment, you have or you don't. And it is interesting that you see some of these players, like, think about Logan Stanley going after Kirill Kaprizov after the injury last season. Mm-hmm. Who was the one that stepped in to try to fight Logan Stanley? Marco Rossi. Yeah. Like, you think about these young kids, they're not the ones that should be doing it.
No.
Like, think about Matt Boldy. There was another injury that happened early on in the season. And it was the player on the other team just refused to fight. And the only reason that anybody was able to get a lick in was because Matt Boldy just grabbed the guy and refused to let him get away. Like, it seems like it's always the youngsters that are the ones stepping in and stepping up.
Right.
When it should be the guys that are paid to do it.
Right.
And like you said, I think that's a large part of the reason that Yakov Trenin got the healthy scratch against Chicago. And I do find it interesting that Trenin was brought in as kind of a Hynes guy. Hynes does not seem to be too impressed.
No. And he called him out pregame for that reason. He's not using his physicality. That's why he's in the NHL, and he's
been scratched twice. He's been demoted to fourth line multiple times. Like, I don't think Hynes is at this point too big of a fan of that.
No, and it's I mean, Colorado. That's why Colorado, when they picked him up, they wanted nothing to do with him going into this season. They're like, this is not he's showing his true colors right now. Hopefully he can change that. But it's tough when you're one of the main reasons you're signed is to be that person to bring the physicality and and he's not doing that at all. And he's clearly not contributing on the score sheet either. So it's like, what are you doing?
What would you say you do here?
Yes.
Well, just don't punch goalies in the face.
Right.
Don't punch Marc-Andre Fleury in the face. Don't do it. Or, like, imagine if Derek Bugard was on the team.
Right.
He would have been arrested.
Right. Oh, yeah. So, yeah.
And I'm not advocating for that, but at the same time, our response in situations like that is necessary. It's implied that it happens. Speaking of things that happen, Mikko Rantanen is no longer a member of the Colorado Avalanche. I'm sorry, what? We'll talk about a major move by the Colorado Avalanche, as well as an interesting theory about the trade deadline this year that was talked about in the squad show that you'll hear later this week. All that coming up as we continue today's episode of Locked On Wild after this. Final segment of today's episode of Locked On Wild. And once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Seth Toupal and Alex Micheletti holding it down here on a Monday. As mentioned, we've got a second episode coming up for you here in a little bit. And then we got the live show for you at 8 o'clock as well. Alex, Mikko Rantanen, no longer a member of the Colorado Avalanche. He is now a Carolina Hurricane. Taylor Hall, also a member of the Carolina Hurricanes in the same trade. Martin Necas headed to the Avs, and I think he scored in his debut just to, of course, why not? This was a pretty big shock, but it's got to be the beginning of some other move that the Avs are making, right?
Yeah, I am 100%. You traded away a top 5 player, top 10 player in the league in Mikko Rantanen, and so I love Marty Necas, but there's got to be another move being made for sure with them. And people were screaming Sidney Crosby, but it doesn't sound like Sidney's going to get moved. So
he's coming here.
Yes, but Jack Drury's a fourth liner. They need another scoring winger for sure to put up there with McKinnon.
And it's not as though the notion of trading Mikko Rantanen was a surprise, because I know I've listened to Locked On Avalanche here and there over the last week plus. They've talked about it. Rantanen wanted a ton of money that just was not going to be possible for Colorado to give him, because you also have Nathan McKinnon. You've got Cale Makar. Like, you have plenty of other players that are worthy of top billing. And if Mikko Rantanen wants 14, he's going to get that as a number 1 somewhere else, not as a number 2 or depending on how things are rolling. I mean, this year, McCarr's playing good enough that Rantanen was the number 3 option. You're not going to get $14 million being the 3rd option on a team.
No. And so, yeah, it stinks for McKinnon because that was his guy. And, it was too bad that Landeskog, I just don't think he's going to ever come back. And so, you're just, you don't have the money, and they just gave Blackwood a ton of dough too, in that. And, so yeah, it's tough. You would think you would hope to get even more back, but he's a pending free agent, so who knows. Carolina's rolling the dice to that what they even gave up. They hope to re-sign Rantanen, but yeah, who knows. He's that's tough to to re-sign somewhere. After a half a season there, so but we'll stay tuned for that.
Could you imagine if he doesn't?
Oh gosh, man,
Yikes.
Carolina. That was the one thing that they've been missing as a superstar. I know Aho's a great player, but I mean Rantanen, like I said, you can argue is a top 5 player in the league, and so I mean if you're able to re-sign that, oh boy, and I was making the joke over the weekend. It's turned into Finalina there with all the Finns in Raleigh.
Yeah, it's something else, and it brings me to a theory that I floated out there on the Squadcast that Locked On Wild listeners will be able to hear, I believe, tomorrow. Didn't have a chance to make the first 2, but now am representing Locked On Wild in the 3rd. We talked about the trade deadline, and Alex, I'm kind of the belief that I think there might be 2 trade deadlines this year, before the Four Nations and after. But you look at the Eastern Conference wildcard picture, and the Pittsburgh Penguins are 7 points out, 7 points behind the Tampa Bay Lightning. So they're probably the cutoff because the Buffalo Sabres they have fallen off again.
Yes.
They are 14 points back of the Tampa Bay Lightning for the second wildcard spot. So they're out. They're history. Beyond that, everybody else is within 10 points, which I think means that at least a high majority of those teams are going to continue to try to go for it.
Mm-hmm.
It might be slim pickings at the trade deadline this year.
Yeah, it's chaos, right? And a team that we were hoping that would fall off, the Islanders, all they do is win now. And
now they're
crazy.
buying too.
Yes. Yeah, they just picked up Scotty Peronovich from St. Louis, and I can't really figure out St. Louis. They just kind of seem stuck in right where they are, and they don't want to figure out if they want to tank or if they want to be in the playoff race. And it seems like Jordan Bennington is a shell of himself now, which is crazy.
The St. Louis Blues are delightfully horrifying.
Yes.
23, and 4. -9 in the goals department, 11 and 13 at home, 12 and 14 on the road. Like I said, delightfully horrifying.
It's crazy. And another frustrating thing too with the Four Nations, Alex Pietrangelo, he's said he's removing himself from the Four Nations team with Team Canada due to an injury. And then I checked the box score last night, and he played 24 minutes. I mean, he played almost the most minutes on the team. So it's like, are guys really taking this serious? That's going to be interesting to watch, because hopefully it doesn't just turn into a gimmick and guys actually try, because then it's like, why are they taking all this time off of the schedule to play this, So.
Yeah. I don't get it, I guess, but
yeah.
We'll see. Look at the Western Conference wildcard chase right now. So the Calgary Flames are in wildcard 2 with 55 points. Vancouver is 3 points behind. They have done everything but actually catch on fire this year.
And all they do have is drama all the time. It's crazy. And the most hilarious thing over the weekend, they called up another Elias Pettersson. So everybody was making the jokes now that JT Miller has to deal with 2 Elias Petterssons on the team. I want to see how they did the back of the jersey, because they have the exact same name. So I don't know how they do that, but yeah,
Who knows?
there's all sorts of chaos right there for the last couple of spots.
Yeah, St. Louis, as we mentioned, delightfully horrifying. Utah is 6 points back. I'm not even going to attempt to figure out what the Utah Hockey Club is doing this year, other than being 21-28. But they can beat the Wild pretty much every time they play them.
Yeah. So.
Seattle is 8 points back. They're 22-28. And then Anaheim, Nashville, Chicago, and San Jose are pretty much all out of it by now. Mm-hmm. Nashville is the only team of that mix that's actually actively trying to win games, and they're still behind the Anaheim Ducks.
Yeah, it's crazy. And Anaheim beat them the other night, right? So it's like, my goodness.
Ugh, ick.
Yeah.
Yuck. So it could end up that the Western Conference playoff field is already set. It's just a matter of who is in what position.
Right.
It probably is actually the case.
Right. And
unless somebody from the mix falls out.
And as we've talked about, I mean, it always seems to be the exact same playoff matchups. Yeah. Like, you're going to get Edmonton, LA again. It's just like, who wants to see that? And I put out on X there, I was like, I'm mentally preparing myself for Jake Ottinger to goalie the Wild for a couple of games.
Isn't it pretty much exactly this? So it's Winnipeg and Calgary is slightly different.
That would be the only main difference. But
it's Vegas and Colorado. We've had that.
Yes.
Edmonton and Los Angeles is 5 years in a row.
Yeah, it gets worse as it goes on too. They hung in
Dallas
there
and Minnesota. How have the Kings only played 46 games this year?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah,
I believe they had at least one postponed due to the fires,
right?
Which would be understandable.
And
they were
6. And the team they were going to play that night was the Calgary Flames, which it's like, my goodness.
Yeah, I'm telling you, there may not be a ton of teams unless the Wild now can set their sights on Brock Besser and maybe pull him out of Vancouver.
Right. But
it's going to cost you.
Oh, 100%. And they don't have a first-round pick now, so it's like...
And you need a broker.
Right. Which is because, the third-party broker, the Wild have done that in the past. But
Jesper Wallstedt, come on down. No, don't do that.
No.
Don't even joke about that. Well, we'll see, because we obviously keep you up to date on everything Minnesota Wild, everything trade deadline, and everything what is going on in the NHL. Sounds like Gary Bettman is starting to mull retirement, so we'll keep an eye on that too. Thank you for tuning into today's episode, everybody. Appreciate all of the support throughout the week as well. We got another episode coming up for you here right after this one is done. And make sure to check out our live stream tonight at 8 p.m. right here on YouTube. Appreciate everybody tuning in. Make sure to subscribe if you have not already. And don't miss out on any new episodes we have for you throughout the week. We have new episodes every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network.